All right, welcome to lesson 1.5b. We're going to continue talking about complex numbers. The first thing that we need to talk about is called the principal square root, and that is right here in the box. Principal square root, if you're taking the square root of negative a, that's the same thing as the square root of a times I. We always want to pull that I out before we multiply, and we'll see an example of that right away here with example number 1. So we want to multiply the square root of negative 14 times the square root of negative 2. Now, you might be tempted to multiply these together right away. Like negative 14 times negative 2 would be positive 28. And then you would, factor tree or simplify that, however, and you get 2 root 7. However, if you did it this way, it would be incorrect. So don't do that. What we need to do is pull the I out first. So the square root of negative 14 is the same thing as the square root of 14 times the square root of negative 1, which of course is I, times the square root of negative 2 is the square root of 2 times I. Then we can keep going. Now we can multiply what's under the square root. So 14 times 2 is the square root of 28. And I times I is I squared. Now, I squared is just negative 1, so we can put a negative 1 out in front. It's a negative 1. Trust me on that. And then 28, we want to simplify that if you want to do a factor tree, or if you realize that that's the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. However this works for you is fine. But a 2 should come out along with that negative 1. And the 7 stays in. So our answer is negative 2 root 7. So notice what I did over here in red, that was the incorrect way to do it. You've got to pull those I's out first. Moving on to subtracting. Remember, you can only subtract like radicals, and that includes if it has an I or not. So let's clean up this. Square root of 48, if you do a factor tree on 48, let's see, it's going to be 6 and 8, and 3 and 2, and that was supposed to be a 4. Sorry about that. So we can pull out 2 times 2, so that's a 4. The 3 stays in, and that square root of the negative 1 is going to become an I. The book might put it in a different spot. It doesn't really matter to me if you put it before or after. I kind of like to put it before. Minus 27. If you do a factor tree on that, you turn that with 3 times 3 times 3. So anyway, you can pull a 3 out. The I comes out, and the 3 stays in. Now we have like radicals, root 3 and root 3. So all we need to do is subtract 4I minus 3I, which is going to give us 1I. So I root 3. For our next example, this is, of course, a FOIL problem. We're doing negative 1 plus root negative 3. But before we go through and FOIL this, that was supposed to be a negative. You can't see that very good. We need to pull the I out of that. So let's rewrite this as negative 1 plus I root 3 and negative 1 plus I root 3. Okay, so we have negative 1 times negative 1, which of course is positive 1. We have negative I root 3 and negative I root 3, so that's negative 2I root 3. And then finally we have I root 3 times I root 3. Well, I times I is going to be I squared. That's I squared. And root 3 times root 3 is just 3. Don't worry, we're going to clean this up. I squared is negative 1. This is a negative 1 right here. So negative 1 times 3, this entire term becomes negative 3. So now we've got our like terms. 1 minus 3 is negative 2. And then this is not a like term, minus 2I root 3. And that's as far as we can go on that. It is simplified as far as it can go. I don't know what's happening. Pushing the wrong buttons. Trying to stop this recording.